thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Cameron.
Let's talk about the fact that some establishment Republicans reportedly reluctant to support Ted Cruz and not really being as vocal as you've been on the campaign trail. How much of a struggle is that?
Well, we have recently had a number of former Bush supporters get on our team. We will be making announcements about that later this week. And the reason is, it is a two-man race right now. This weekend was phenomenal for us. Picking up Kansas very easily, same way in Maine. But maybe the real story was the fact that we closed the gap tremendously in Louisiana. We're going to win. We believe we're going to win Idaho. We're going to be a very strong second in Michigan. Saturday, we raised more money than we ever have in the entire campaign. I think it's over for Rubio. Florida is maybe his Hail Mary. Maybe it's a sentimental effort. But the reality is, it is a two-man race right now. And we're feeling very good because the more the spotlight is on on Donald Trump, the better Ted Cruz looks, because people realize he is not a conservative. That would be Donald Trump's voting for his support of Democrat candidates, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, and Nancy Pelosi. The reality is he has been pro-choice. Now he's pro-life. He's he's embraced Mayor Bloomberg and his gun control. He supports universal health care. And these later primary voters realize he is not the great new shiny object that they thought he was 3 or 4 months ago.
Well, you speak of these primary voters, and one of the reasons given as to why the establishment is not ready to get behind Senator Cruz is that they believe he is too conservative and there will be no compromise if he's in a general election, thus minimizing the kind of support he'll be able to get if it's a head-to-head against Bernie Sanders or if it's a head-to-head against Hillary Clinton. And I bring that up because when you look back at your own race, at the time, you pointed out that it was a fail for the party, or, quote, irresponsible for the party to just let Obamacare fail. You said rather people should encourage colleagues to coalesce around a replacement if needed, as opposed to having this all-or-nothing attitude. And you also pointed out to Saxby Chambliss, the retiring senator, having golfed with President Obama to try to bring in some civility, and as a result, he was punished for it.
Well, you know, the reality is the public is fed up with Washington, D.C. Somebody to disrupt the status quo. That's why Donald Trump has gotten so much attention. But the more they look at it, they realize Ted Cruz has done the same thing. He has disrupted business as usual in Washington, D.C., but he, unlike Donald Trump, he has been consistently conservative. And so that's why this has become a two-man race. People do want to take the establishment on, and they see Ted Cruz as the guy who's done that. I understand, as you pointed out, the romance with the outsider label, but the reality, people of Republican voters, they want to make sure that it's still a conservative. In the case of my race, my opponent was an outsider, but he was also a conservative. If he had the views and beliefs of Donald Trump, I would probably be a U.S. senator right now. But the reality is, Trump is not a conservative. Ted Cruz is. They are both disruptors to the status quo, which is what the pent-up demand is right now.
But does the disruption that you refer to and how we process what the American people see as an ineffective Congress, when you think about Senator Cruz on the Senate floor holding up business, you think about former Speaker John Boehner, being essentially run out of town by Tea Partiers who wanted to be obstructionists, not compromisers, not people of flexibility. The list goes on and on when you think about this quote-unquote disruption and who eventually Americans will blame. Could they say that it is you and members of Congress who set the tone for disruption, and as a result, you birthed this individual now leading your party, Donald Trump?
Well, I think that our party is longing for a Reaganist conservative. And as you remember, when Reagan was running, particularly in the primary against Gerald Ford, which he lost, he was considered too conservative. Ted Cruz is the same way. He's considered too conservative right now by the establishment, who likes the status quo, who protects invested in it. But the reality is a leader can win people over to his or her way of thinking, and Ted Cruz is that type guy. You think about all the executive orders that Barack Obama has done ends around with Congress on. It's not because he was it wasn't because Republicans oppose it. Democrats oppose these things too. He used his executive orders. I would say very reluctantly, he has been very effective on his causes. Ted Cruz will be the same way. He can use the power of the office, the executive orders, the powers of appointing the right judges, and I believe you will see people get on board.
Given what we are talking about today, you brought up Ronald Reagan. Obviously, many people giving great respect to the former First Lady Nancy Reagan and her words and advice to the president at the time about Mikhail Gorbachev, and you discuss the compromising spirit. Under Ted Cruz's standards of the conservative today, would Ronald Reagan be conservative enough for Ted Cruz? From amnesty to other international decisions that have been made, would Ronald Reagan be conservative enough for Ted Cruz?
Absolutely, because he was strong on national defense. He wanted to reduce the size of the federal government.
What about amnesty?
And he wanted to increase personal freedom. I think Ronald Reagan, if he was alive today, he probably would have said, you know, that amnesty bill was a failure because the enforcement part of it did not take place. And that's what conservatives have always argued. You have to secure the border. And I think Ronald Reagan would probably be the first to point out the border did not get secured the way it was supposed to be. But I'll say this, Heidi Cruz is a wonderful, intelligent, very accomplished woman in her own right. She would be able to be a Nancy Reagan. She and Ted Cruz are in love as much as the Reagans were. They've got great kids. They're a great family unit. I've seen kids not tell you how inspirational they are as a couple.
And certainly she may be all of those things, but you know there are critics also who say that she's a part of Wall Street.
Well, you know, there were critics of Nancy Reagan, and I mean, no matter what you do, you can't find the perfect candidate.
All right, Congressman Jack Kingston, thank you so much for your time.